Choyo Sampo Pagyu Trashipa Tuche Tempe Trile Yarngo Pande Lame Shabla Solwade Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Jitsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Sikso So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sungi Nawa Tsedo So Tseje Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshune Yila Sambe Dede Malupa Gemel Hungi Drupra Chingelo Tsoni Sodan Diktun Shaupe Tse Dungi Namke Yinsu Lekshune Lapchen Tsoni Yonsu Tsopa Dan Chirani Dun Chamra Chingelo Chancho Pargi Ninsen Tukun Tu Nyu Peme Siudru Lekshune Chancho Drupe Gegen Kunshishi Tungen De La Drubrachi Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chemin Samjur Ngemba Shiwad Chedan Tumbe Dede Malupa Bemel Hungi Drubra Chingelo Dorna Tingne Tsera Tamche Dan Teche Pardo Nekava Tamche Tu Rese Kyamne Lama Kile Me Tukche Chingi Dala Siksoso Gongyab Drewe Nyamta Dachala Chetsun Lame Tuche Rabgongne Kodan Sungi Nawa Dralme Tu Nyamsu Nyongwe Kesan Toprasho Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Chiki Pela Longche Chin Sadan Lamge Yunten Rabzone Dorje Changi Kopa Nyur Tobo Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lo Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tukdan Dagi Chikto Chingi Lo Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lo Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tukdan Dagi Tön Yerme Chikto Chingi Lo Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Sho
The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Cominciamo con un breve esercizio di respirazione.
We start with a short breathing exercise.
Sediamo in una posizione
We
confortevole.
sit in a comfortable position with our back straight but not tense.
Le spalle rilassate,
Our shoulders are relaxed.
la testa leggermente,
Our head is slightly forward.
con la bocca
Our
rilassata,
mouth is relaxed.
la lingua possibilmente che si appoggia sul palato,
With our tongue possibly resting on the palate, the eyes slightly closed, looking downwards.
ci permettiamo per un attimo di
We
essere,
allow ourselves for an instant to be present in the present moment.
portare la mente lì
To
dove
bring our mind where our body is.
sentiamo il nostro corpo,
We feel our body,
osserviamo il nostro
we
respiro.
observe our own breath.
Se sentiamo che ci sono dei parti,
If we feel that there are some parts of our body that are tense,
ci permettiamo ogni
we
volta
allow ourselves every time that we breathe in to collect those tensions and then as we breathe out to loosen them.
come se fosse un movimento
As if it was an inner movement that allows the relaxation of that part of our body. We
l'addome,
observe our abdomen, our chest,
le spalle.
our shoulders, our face.
gentilezza
With gentleness,
portiamo il nostro respiro
we bring our own breath to an abdominal breath.
Inspiriamo
We
profondamente,
breathe in
gonfiando
deeply,
leggermente la pancia
swelling the belly slightly.
ed espiriamo
And we
profondamente
breathe out deeply until the abdomen contracts slightly.
Seguiamo con il respiro
We
yogico,
follow with the yogic breathing, that is, we breathe in a continuous flow, and other than feeling the lower part of the abdomen, we also feel the upper part of our chest,
riempiendo dal basso,
feeling from bottom to top,
inspiriamo tutta l'aria
and we breathe
possibile.
in all the possible air,
Ad
and
espirare,
as we breathe out,
svuotiamo
we
prima
empty first the upper part of our chest, and then lastly the lower part of our abdomen,
contrarre leggermente.
where we contract it slightly.
Inspiriamo
We
profondamente
breathe in
dal
deeply
basso verso l'alto.
from bottom to top.
Espiriamo
And we breathe out
profondamente
deeply
dall'alto
from
verso
top to bottom.
semplicemente respiriamo
Simply breathe with no hurry.
permettiamo naturalmente
We allow ourselves
di creare uno spazio
to
dopo
create some space naturally after the in-breath and after the out-breath,
il trattenere l'aria
holding the air more than
un
being
momento di calma
a forced thing is a moment of calmness before the in-breath and before the out-breath. So we breathe in,
aspettiamo un
we
attimino,
wait a little bit, and then we breathe out. Then we wait a little bit, and then we breathe in again.
inspiro,
So I breathe
trattengo,
in, hold, breathe out, hold, without forcing.
inspiriamo contando fino a
We breathe
4
in, counting to 4,
e tratteniamo
and we
con
hold
4
with 4,
espiriamo
We breathe out with 4 and hold with 2.
Inspiro
Breathe in
4,
4, hold 4. Breathe out 4, hold 2.
Inspiriamo con
We
4,
breathe in with 4,
tratteniamo
hold
6
with 6,
e espiriamo con
breathe
6
out with 6,
e tratteniamo con
and hold with 3.
Inspiro
Breathe in
4,
4,
trattengo 6,
hold 6,
espiro
breathe
6,
out 6,
trattengo,
hold 3,
inspiro 4.
breathe in 4.
Inspiro con 4,
Breathe in 4.
se confortevole trattengo
If it's
8,
comfortable, then I hold with 8, breathe out with 8, and hold with 4.
se fosse troppo
If that
lungo
was too
ognuno
long, then
quello
each
che è
one
confortevole.
remains with what is comfortable for himself.
Idealmente
Ideally, I breathe in with 4,
trattengo 8,
hold 8,
espiro
breathe
8,
out 8,
trattengo
hold
4,
4.
espiro 4.
Breathe in 4.
Manteniamo la consapevolezza
Keep the awareness on our breath,
respiriamo senza
and we
contare.
breathe without counting.
Inspiro,
So I
trattengo,
breathe in,
espiro
hold,
e
then
trattengo.
breathe out, hold.
Piano piano apriamo
Bit
gli
by
occhi.
bit, we open our eyes, we move our hands.
Namo yo alhaye ke dan ludan ne chin ke rubo da mi ke nam dan ruwa kun ke tanam chi tsampa tam che ke to da ge che ten. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Certe volte
Sometimes
noi guardiamo la storia
we look at history,
sia recente
both
sia più
the
lontana,
recent one and the more
e possiamo avere
far
la
away,
sensazione come se
and we can have the
le
feeling
cose
as if
grandiose
the great
accadano
things happen
per cose grandiose.
because of great things.
Quando se andiamo a
When
vedere con un po'
actually,
più di
if we
attenzione,
look with more
vedremo che
attention,
cose
we will see
grandiose
that
accadono
great
per
things
piccole
happen
azioni
for small actions
che sono grandiose,
that are great,
ma sono quelle
but
piccole
are
azioni che
those
riescono a
small
creare un
actions that
effetto domino, riescono a
can
creare, a
create a
trasformare
domino
qualcosa.
effect and transform.
Poi è molto
And then
interessante
it's
perché
also very interesting because
quell'azione non
that
sarebbe
action
possibile se non
wouldn't
ci
be
fosse
possible, wouldn't have
quell'altra
been
che si
possible if
unisce
there
con quell'altra
wasn't
che si
also the other
unisce.
one that connected to the other one and so on.
C'era in Tibet
And in
circa
Tibet,
all'inizio
around
dell'XI
at the
secolo,
beginning of the 11th century,
un re
there was a king,
si chiamava Yeshua,
was called
non
Yeshua,
ricordo bene, io
if I
faccio sempre
remember
confusione
correctly. I
con
always
i
make
nomi
confusion
ebrei.
with names, so don't take me
Se un giorno vedete Lama, ho detto il
literally.
nome sbagliato,
If
molto probabile.
if someone could say,
Comunque, se mi ricordo bene, era
anyway,
Yeshua.
I remember
E
that
lui
it
a
was
un certo
Yeshua,
punto
and
vide
then
la
he at
situazione
certain
del
point
buddismo
saw
in
the
Tibet,
situation of Buddhism in Tibet,
guardò e disse no, qua
and
abbiamo
said,
bisogno di un
okay, here actually
maestro
we need some
che
master
abbia
that
le
has
realizzazioni, che
the
abbia la
realizations,
conoscenza,
that
che
has the
abbia il
knowledge,
carisma
that
per
that
riuscire a
is charismatic
ristabilire
to be
bene il
able to
buddismo.
reestablish Buddhism
Il
well.
buddismo era arrivato qualche
Buddhism
secolo prima,
arrived a few centuries
inizialmente
earlier,
con Guru
initially with
Padmasambhava,
Guru Padmasambhava,
poi c'era stato un
and then
momento in
there
cui
had been a moment
c'è stato un
where
altro re
there was
e i re
another
avevano tanto
king,
potere.
and kings had a lot of power.
Questo re si chiamava
And this king
Lantarma.
was named
Il
Lantarma,
re Lantarma era uno
and
che
he
era molto pro
was
materialismo,
very, very much
quindi era uno
pro-materialism, so
favorevole a fare
favorable
le guerre,
to
a
to
conquistare gli
to
altri,
wars, to make
eccetera,
wars, and
eccetera,
to
ed era uno
conquer the
contrario al
others, and
buddismo.
he was against
Quindi
Buddhism.
il re Lantarma
And so this king,
ha
Lantarma,
ucciso tanti
killed many
praticanti, chiuso
practitioners,
monasteri,
closed
distrutto le
monasteries,
statue.
destroyed statues.
Addirittura in Tibet le
Even in
statue che
Tibet,
hanno
the
sopravvissuto
statues that
all'epoca di
survived the time
Lantarma
of Lantarma
vengono trattate con
are
molto
treated with a
rispetto.
lot of
Si dice
respect
che le
because
uniche
it
statue
is
che
said
non si
that the
potevano
only statues
distruggere
that couldn't be
era quella
destroyed
che una volta che
are those
andavano
that ones that they
l'hanno
could and
colta
try to
sulla
smash
fronte,
it.
se la statua diceva
If
qualcosa,
the statues said
a quel
something,
punto
then
non
at
la
that point they
distruggevano, la
wouldn't
lasciavano
destroy it.
lì.
They would leave it there.
Ci sono qualche
And
statua che è
there are a few
sopravvissuta a
statues that
quell'epoca,
survived that time,
viste con molto
and so they
rispetto.
are seen with a lot of respect.
E a quell'epoca c'erano
And at
pochi
that time,
monaci
there
che
were
sono
few monks
sopravvissuti
that
perché erano
survived because
scappati,
they ran
scappati,
away.
stavano
More than
facendo un
running away,
ritiro in
actually,
mezzo alle
they were
montagne.
doing a retreat
In
in
Tibet
the
in particolare,
mountains.
in mezzo alle montagne. Comunque
Okay, in Tibet, everywhere
erano
is in the
ancora
mountains,
più
but
in
anyway,
alto
they
in
were
qualche
even more
caverna da
high
qualche parte
up in some cave,
e non hanno vissuto
and
tutto quello.
they didn't go through all of that.
Nel frattempo
In the
c'è tutta la
meanwhile,
storia del re
there is the whole
Lantarma,
story of
Lantarma a un certo
King
punto viene
Lantarma, and at a
ucciso.
certain point he gets killed
Da un praticante
by
che
a
vedeva il
practitioner
quanto
that
che lui stava
saw how much
distruggendo
he
la
was
propria cultura,
destroying
la
the
spiritualità, eccetera,
culture and
eccetera,
spirituality,
e decise di
and
prendere
he
questo
decided
atto, di dire ok, l'unico
do
modo
this
che
act.
posso
Okay, the only way
fermare
that I
quello che
can
sta
stop
accadendo
what is
qua è
going on
fermarlo.
here is by
E fa
stopping the
questo
king,
atto,
and he does
oh,
this
su cui potremmo
act
aprire lunghe
on
discussioni.
which we could open long discussions, but it's not
Qualcuno
the
avrà già
moment.
visto la
Someone
danza del cappello nero,
maybe has already seen like the dance of the
sì,
black hat.
no? Non tanto.
Yes, no?
È una danza in
It's a
cui
dance
c'è un
where
cappello
there is a black hat
grande così con tutta una
as big as
franja,
this with
non si
like
vede bene
some
il viso.
fringe where you don't see the face,
C'è un vestito con
and
le
then
maniche
there is
belle
some
lunghe, triangolo.
dress with some long sleeves, like triangular sleeves,
Questo
and
rappresenta la
this
storia
represents the
di
story
questa
of this
persona
person
che va
that
vestito così su
goes
un
dressed like
cavallo
that on a horse
e arriva vicino al re
and
e
goes
aveva
close to
queste
the king,
maniche
and
lunghe
he
per
has these
poter
long
nascondere
sleeves to be able to
l'arco.
hide the bow.
E a un certo punto
And
lancia una
then at a certain
freccia
point he
e
throws
uccide
an arrow and
Lantarma.
kills the king.
E ancora oggi in
And
Tibet,
even
a
today
dire la
in
verità,
Tibet,
sempre
to
di
speak
meno
the
le
truth,
nuove generazioni non li ho più visti fare questo, ma
well, actually less
fino a
and less the
pochissimo
new
tempo fa,
generations, I
quelli
haven't
un po'
seen
più
them doing
anziani in
this, but
Tibet,
until
quando
a while
andavi a
ago,
salutarli,
when you went to
una delle
say to
cose
greet
molto
them,
comuni
one
era
of the
fare
most
così.
common things was to do this.
Quindi mano sulla
So,
testa, un'altra mano
hand on the
dietro
head,
e
another
la
one in the
lingua
back,
fuori.
and the tongue outside.
Poi c'è il risucchio.
And then you also, like, there is this
E
kind of
questo
inhaling. Why this? Because at the end it became something to say, I am not like King Lantarma, because it was said that this king had a horn on his head and a tail and a black tongue. And so there was to say, I'm not against Buddhism, I'm not like King Lantarma. Anyway, when this time ended of this king, these few monks that were left, I think there were about 6, and that remained in the caves, they came down and saw everything that was destroyed, and they started again to teach. And from this, partly, this is what today is called the Nyingma tradition, which means the ancient school, the ancient tradition of Tibet.
Bene che loro hanno potuto
Great that they were able to take the tradition again, but a few centuries after that, the king, the Yeshao king, saw that anyway there wasn't a lot of clarity, there was a lot of confusion about Buddhism. One was saying something, another one was saying another thing. And so he said, okay, here there is something wrong. We need someone that has the knowledge, the experience, the realizations, and that is also charismatic to come. And so he had this idea, okay, let's invite Atisha. I wonder how could Yeshao know about Atisha, because at that time it's not like he has social media. No, he was in Tibet, in the middle of the mountains, and Atisha was where today there is Bangladesh, more or less. Actually, not really, but close to Bangladesh, where there was the monastery of Vikramashila. And maybe someone talked about Atisha to this master, and he had like this intuition in his heart and this deep desire, okay, I want Atisha to come to Tibet. And I asked myself, look, the power of one thought, of one person. That was possible because someone talked to him about Atisha, otherwise he would have never got there. And Atisha, in order to be able to invite this master from India, Yeshua, in order to invite Atisha, starts a fundraising campaign. Because, okay, imagine the following. In the 11th century, from India, Tibet was seen like a place of a barbaric place. It wasn't like an easy place where you would go on vacation. And so, if they went to the monastery of Vikramashila asking that their most important master will come to them, what would be the most likely answer? If you want, I can give you the one that just graduated, but we're not sending you our main master. And so they somehow had to show that they had all the resources in order to be able to welcome him well and to give him the conditions to teach and so on. It's a bit like, comes to my mind like someone that comes here at the center and says, look, so I want to invite Lama, where? In a faraway place. For how long? I don't know, like 3 years.
Cosa dice il CDA del centro?
What will the managers of the center say? No. But if they come saying, look, that we have the resources, we can create an event that is well made, organize things well and everything, then they have some chances more in general. We human beings are more or less like that, like after centuries, still like that. So the time they start this sort of fundraising. And in the midst of this, one day the king, Yeshua, when there were small rains, so he goes to another king that welcomed him, but when he got there, then he imprisoned him because he was against Buddhism, this other king. So he imprisoned him and said to his nephew, Chanchub, he told him, look, Dad, okay, if you want me to free your uncle, the king, then you should bring me the equivalent of his weight in gold. And there starts another campaign of fundraising. Okay, let's save the king. And so they go through this whole movement, they're able to collect a lot of gold, they get there with this gold, because the alternative thing would have been to go in war, to war. And so they get all that gold, and when they put it on a scale, like the king and the gold, for a little bit the gold is not enough, and the answer is, look, there is enough gold for the body without the head, so if you want, I can cut it off. And okay, of course not. And they manage to talk through a window somewhere where, the Yeshua and his nephew are able to talk, and Yeshua tells him, look, this life that I have, I've already done a lot with it, I've already given a lot. For me, more or less, yeah, I don't really care about dying. The most important thing for me is that the Buddhist teachings are really able to get to Tibet and put their roots there and to clear the things that are not clear. And for this, I beg you to take all this gold that you have collected to save me and to take it in India to invite Atisha. And you bring as an offering not only this, but also my life that I put at the disposal for this. Then at this point, he dies in prison. Then they part. He dies in prison, and they leave to India. When they get to the monastery of Vikramashila, and it's not that they took the plane. Let's remember, they walked through the Himalayas. Then they got to the other side. So it was months and months walking. And for the Tibetans, there was also the difficulty that, for example, they never had experienced heat. So, for example, I talked with a Tibetan lady that left Tibet after like a strange story, got to Brazil in the 50s, more or less. Like a very strange story, but anyway. And she said that when she started climbing down the mountains, she was starting to feel hot, and she was feeling her child sweating, and she thought that he had a fever, so she would put even more clothes on him, because she had never experienced the heat. And another thing that I never expected, me going into Tibet, many times when you go like high altitude, we suffer the altitude, and they also do when they go down. So when they go down, and maybe they ask you, where do you live? In Italy. How high is it? Like 600 meters. But can you manage being so low? Because they were born like with 4,000 meters, so when they go down, their head spin, they get like low pressure, their head hurts. Anyway. And to us it seems strange, and for them it seems strange that you're feeling bad when you're high up in the mountains. Anyway, they go to India, they go to the monastery of Vikramashila, they make requests, and the abbot says, I don't know. What convinced them more than anything was that the king gave his life for that. And then at that point, they ask Atisha, and Atisha says, look, it's you who has to give the last word, whether you want to go or not. I give you the permission to go for 2 years. And then at this point, Atisha goes on a retreat, and during this retreat, he has a vision with Tara. And in this vision, Tara tells him, if you go to Tibet, it will be more beneficial for the Dharma and for the beings, but your life will be around 12 years shorter. And he decides to go.
Atisha
arrives in Tibet. After a long journey, in the meanwhile, he stops almost for 1 year in Nepal. So if someone goes to Kathmandu, there is a small temple that is today in the Tamil area, where there is the more touristic area. And then there is a small temple that is where Atisha lived, because the journeys were very long. So when he got there, the king received him, asked for teachings and so on, and that's where he also helped to revisit the Sutra of the Wisdom, of the Perfection of Wisdom in 10,000 verses. And anyway, after this he gets to Tibet, spends about 2 years there giving a lot of teachings, and then he has to come back. And that's when they were about to leave. Atisha was about to leave because he had a commitment to stay maximum for 2 years in Tibet, and Chachupo, which became his disciple, that invited him, asks him to give one last teaching. And he says, look, actually what I had to say and teach, I already talked to you. And so, no, but please. And so he insisted, and then eventually gives this short teaching that it's really advice that goes to the essence. And then in the following days we will also read it together. One of the parts of this text says that during the day we are distracted, during the night we sleep, there are many objects of knowledge, and soon we will die. So it's part of that text. But I would say, look how incredible that today we are in the 2026 in Italy, and we are still able to access to the words that were said by Atisha that came to Tibet and then eventually didn't go back to India because there was a war in between. And so, because of this war, it was too dangerous for him to cross, and they sent someone to bring a message, together with the text that Atisha composed during the time that he was in Tibet, because finding himself in front of a population that was interested in Buddhism but didn't have a solid basis, he had to explain things that in India was taken for granted. And he wrote the text called Chanchublandran, which means the light that clarifies the path of the gradual stages to enlightenment. And indeed, like a sort of manual, like step by step. And when the abbot of Vikramashila receives this text, remains profoundly impressed and says, okay, wow, if Atisha had remained in India, he would have never composed such a special text. And so he sends a message back and says, I free the king from the commitment that he had with me, and Atisha can stay all the time that he wants. And he spends about 17 years in Tibet until he dies. For me, Atisha is one of the masters that when I read his text, they touch me in a very particular way. I don't know why, and so I wanted to share his words with you these days. But this was just to contextualize a bit how there was Yeshua, and someone talked to him about Atisha, and he generated this desire, and then at a certain point something very bad happened, that he was imprisoned. But I asked myself, if he hadn't been imprisoned, then would Atisha ever arrived in Tibet? I don't know. But the point is that eventually it worked. And so it's very strong when we see how much the present moment, what we have here today, has a complex story. And it was as if there are many parts that in their whole made this moment like how it is. And for me, one of the most important things is to see how there is no specific word or thought or action or interaction that is in vain. Because somehow that word, the name of Atisha, arrived to the ears of Yeshua, and he gave importance to it. And there are all these interactions. Anyway, Atisha was a master from what he can read by his text, very direct, very present. And this text that I wanted to read together these days is for me one of the guidelines. Because what happens is that we very often during our lifetime we learn many things. We have a lot of knowledge, but one of the qualities that we are missing sometimes is the conscientiousness. By conscientiousness, the Tibetan term is pagyu, which is translated as conscientiousness, but its definition is to be aware of what one already knows. Lack of conscientiousness is the lack of awareness of what one already knows. For example, are we mortal or immortal? And we mean by with this body and this life. In other words, we will die sooner or later or not. Are you sure? Okay. But in the present moment, are we aware of our mortality, or do we act in a way that is not aware of our mortality? Usually we live as if we were immortal inside of our mortality. This is described as a lack of consciousness of one's own mortality. Another example, we know that phenomena, that the world that surrounds us is it permanent or impermanent? I mean, we don't need a degree in philosophy to understand that everything that is around us is constantly transforming. It's not that we need like deep studies and knowledge, but when we live situations, anyway, they appear to us as if they were permanent, and we relate to them as if they were like that. And so another time, once again, we relate to the impermanent world as if it was permanent, and this is lack of a consciousness. And so, my goal these days, and what I believe that is one of the main goals that we have, is not that of teaching new things.
Il nostro compito principale
our main
nel condividere il Dharma, per me, quello che io mi sento di dover fare
in sharing Dharma, what I feel like that I have to do here is not to teach. Once I realized that I have very little patience to teach. I found myself in having to give teachings, lessons of Tibetan, and there I gave the lesson that, to say the truth, it's very easy. Because like once that I talked to you, the alphabet.
Okay, imparato l'alfabeto.
Okay, I taught the alphabet. Then I taught 4 basic grammar rules. Then you have to study. I did my part. And it's not that there is so much that one has to explain, but somehow I saw that there was the expectation that one has to repeat what I had already explained. So I explained the alphabet, and it's even recorded. Okay, now you repeat. It's not that I'm just sitting there to repeat that together with you, because as I'm teaching Tibetan, my task is that of transmit knowledge. What we are doing here is not teaching. My main job here together with you is to generate consciousness. Somehow is to remember the things that we already know, but that somehow we forget. And in our daily life, to have a direction, to have a guideline, that where we can say, okay, what do I have to do? What way should I behave? How should I live my daily life? Not in a way that is, how shall I put it, like sort of moralistic, that okay, you can do this, you cannot do that, but like someone that has a deep experience and is able to give us a direction that then we're able to follow. And so what I find in this text of Aticca, that is called the Jewel Garland of the Bodhisattva, and then I also will have a very short advertising. Who doesn't have this book, you can find it in the shop, and then when you're in the shop also you buy something else.
No? Non è subliminare, proprio.
This is not subliminal, it's really direct and straight. What happens is that, okay, this little book here, I put this text together a few years ago, and it's, for me, one of the most precious books that are there. Inside of here, we have 4 texts, and these texts are, for me, among the most precious texts that we have. by absolute, like as a sort of guideline.
Il primo è stato
The
scritto da
first
Atisha,
was written by
il
Atisha,
secondo
the
da
second by
Geshe Tampa, che
Geshe
sono gli
Langri
8
Tampa,
versi
that are called the 8
dell'addestramento
verses
mentale,
of mind training,
e vanno in una sorta di crescendo di
and they
difficoltà.
go
Il
in a
primo
sort
è
of
più
growing
accessibile, il
difficulty. The
secondo è
more is
facile
the
da
most
capire,
accessible.
difficilissimo da
The second
praticare.
one is very easy to understand, but
Possibile.
very
Poi abbiamo
difficult
i
to
7 punti
practice,
dell'addestramento
but
mentale, più
possible.
difficile da capire,
Then we have
più
the
da
7-point
praticare,
mind training, a
difficoltà è
bit more
uguale.
difficult to
E poi c'è l'ultimo,
understand,
che
but
è l'Ojon Kyukmen,
equally
viene chiamato la medicina che fa vomitare il
easy
tumore
to
interiore
practice. And then we have the
dell'egoismo.
medicine to vomit the inner tumor of
Ed è un testo
selfishness,
proibito per i
and
minori di
it's
18 anni,
a text that is forbidden to the
inteso che
uh,
è un
to the,
testo di autocritica,
to
scritto da Panchen Losang
it's a
Gyaltsen,
text
e non
of
è un testo per
self-criticism
quando uno
written
sta
by
cominciando.
Panchen Lobsang Chökyi Gyatso.
Deve avere un
It's
po' di
not a text for
stabilità
beginners.
necessaria.
One should have some stability.
Però veramente questo
But
piccolo
really,
librettino
this
qui
little book
è
here
qualcosa da
is
tenere con
something that
molto
we should
rispetto, con
treat with a
molto
lot of
affetto
respect, with a
e
lot
da
of affection,
utilizzare,
and to use it,
perché non è un libro da leggere una
because it's
volta e
not
basta, è
something
qualcosa
that
da
we should read just
utilizzare, da
once,
ricordare. Io volevo in
but
questi giorni
something to
passare un
revisit
po'
and
le
to
parole
remind
di
ourselves.
Atisha,
And I wanted to look at the
perché
words of
per me
Atisha these days, because
è uno dei testi, una delle
because for
linee
me it's
guida
one of
per
the
me nella vita.
texts and guidelines in life in general.
Ed è normale che noi
And
nella
it's
vita ci
normal
troviamo
that
in
in
certe
life we
volte
find
momenti un po'
ourselves
smarriti.
sometimes in moments
Siamo
where we
momenti
are
in
a
cui
bit
diciamo cosa
lost,
faccio,
moments
come
where we say,
reagisco,
but
qual è
how,
la cosa giusta,
what do I do?
eccetera.
What is
E
the right
avere
thing to do? How
qualcuno
should
che
I
ci
behave?
guida
And to have someone that guides
è
us is
fondamentale.
fundamental.
E questo per me Atisha è sempre stato
And
una
for
guida
me,
importante.
in this,
Poi,
Atisha has always been a very
piccolo dettaglio,
important
no, di
guide.
questa profonda
And a small detail, I have this
connessione con Atisha,
profound connection with Atisha.
che poi Atisha è una
And
delle
then
vite
Atisha is one of the
precedenti
previous
di
lives
Trijang
of
Rinpoche,
Trijang Rinpoche,
che è il maestro
that
di
is
Lama
the
Ganchen
master of
Rinpoche.
Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, that
Alla
is
mia
there
sinistra
at my
rappresentando
left.
una delle sue vite
One of
passate,
his previous lives was Atisha.
comunque sia,
Anyway,
che adesso la
that
sua
is
reincarnazione
now
c'è
his
qua la foto,
reincarnation. We have his
poi
picture
stavo
here,
traducendo ieri.
and I
Solo
was
per dire che ci
translating
sono queste
yesterday just to say
connessioni.
that there are these connections
Ritorniamo
somehow.
al testo di
Okay,
Atisha.
let's go
Perciò
back to the
ripeto,
text
questo
of
è un testo
Atisha. So
che io lo
I
voglio
repeat,
leggere
this
con
is text that
calma,
I
piano
want to
piano, però
read
serve come per
slowly with
aiutarci ad
calmness, but it
avere
helps
una
us,
linea guida.
it serves us to have a guideline for our daily life.
Il testo si chiama Bodhisattva Mani Avali.
The text is called Bodhisattva Mani Avali, so the jewel garland of the Bodhisattva.
Perché il Bodhisattva
The Bodhisattva
è colui
is
che vuole
who
fortemente
strongly
svilupparsi spiritualmente
wants
per
to
aiutare.
develop spiritually in order to help the
E
others.
già questo ci
And
dice
already this tells us a lot.
ci vuole ancora un po' per finire. Quindi il
And
Bodhisattva
so the Bodhisattva
è qualcuno che
is someone
segue un processo
that
innanzitutto
goes through
molto lineare.
a process, first of all, that is very linear, but that is important for us to
Il
understand.
processo di prima di
That is the
tutto
process,
riuscire a
first of all, of
vedersi
being
nell'altro.
able to see oneself in the other.
Perché noi alla
Because
base
we, at the basis,
abbiamo questo aspetto
we have
nel
this
quale
aspect where
noi facciamo molta
we
fatica
have a
ad
really hard time
accettare
to
la
accept
violenza o
the
la sofferenza
violence
in
or the
qualcuno
suffering
in
in
cui noi ci
someone
vediamo.
in which we see ourselves.
E per questo anche
And
che se
for
noi andiamo a
this,
vedere
it's
le
also
violenze
that
in
if
qualche
we
modo sistemiche,
see somehow like
una
systemic
della base
violence,
per poter
one of what the
permettere delle
basic
forti
things to be able
violenze
to
è
allow
creare
strong violence is to create
distacco,
distance, to create
creare un
detachment,
senso
to
di
create a sense
superiorità.
of superiority.
No? E poi possiamo vedere anche quando
We
ci
can
sono
also see
situazioni di genocidi e cose
when
del
there are
genere.
some
Molto
situations of
spesso anche le
genocide,
terminologie
also
degli
the
altri non sono
terminology
persone.
like, okay, the others are not people.
Ok? Ed esiste questo luogo
And
di
there is
sentirsi
this
con superiorità.
place
Quindi esiste un
where
luogo di superiorità, distacco.
there is a behavior
Perché
of
se io mi vedo
superiority
in
and
te,
detachment, because if I see
io
myself in you,
naturalmente
then
genero
naturally
empatia.
I generate empathy.
Da un lato, quando io ho
On one
capito
hand,
questo, ho
when
detto,
I
"Mamma
saw
mia,
this,
come
then
siamo
I told myself, wow,
autocentrati."
we are so self-centered.
Un esempio chiarissimo è
A clear
andiamo dal
example of this
medico,
is if we go to a
siamo
doctor
nella sala
and we
d'attesa
are in the waiting
e a un
room,
certo punto
then at a
c'è
certain
vicino a
point
noi
next to us
una
there is a
persona
person
che sta
that
aspettando
is
e
waiting and
ciao,
asks,
buongiorno, e
hello,
ci
good
accorgiamo
morning,
che ha
and we
la stessa
realize that
malattia nostra, gli stessi
she has
problemi
the
nostri.
same disease,
Cosa
the same
sentiamo
problems
verso
that we
quella
have. What do we
persona?
feel towards her?
Attrazione, avversione,
Attraction,
indifferenza.
aversion, or indifference?
Ma
we feel like a certain attraction, like a certain empathy. Somehow we feel quite close to that person. Why? Because I see myself in you. The first time that I realized of this, also I was a kid, and I was in São Paulo, and as I was a kid, I was passionate about computers, and I just obtained my first computer that my grandpa gave me for the bar mitzvah. My grandpa was Hebrew, so when one is 12 or 13 years old, one should do the bar mitzvah. So I went to India, and but anyway, he gave me the present, and he gave me this first computer. I was obsessed with the Mac at the time, and we're talking about the 94. Anyway, my grandpa gave me this computer, and then one day I was in the car in the middle of the traffic of São Paulo, and I see a car passing by with on the car a sticker of the Apple. That at the time only the people that bought the computers had them, so it was like very few people, not like that, not like now that is very common. And so I remember looking at that car and feeling like a sort of closeness towards the person that was driving the car, a certain sympathy. And then I observed myself and I'm like, what am I doing? What does it mean? Just because, he has the same type of computer that I like, and so he's nice, but I don't even know that person. But we work like that. When we see ourselves in the other, then we are able to generate empathy. And for this, the first step actually is that in order to be able to get to the bodhisattva, is that of generating what is called equanimity. Equanimity in seeing that everyone suffers of the same problems. That we all suffer, that no one wants to suffer, that we all want to be happy, and the happiness that we have is not enough, that we are guided by selfishness and ignorance in the same way. And when I'm able to see that the other is in the cycle of samsara just as I do, that becomes a basis to be able to generate empathy. And so one of the exercises, according to me, that it's very important to do at the beginning, because it's pointless to talk about great love and great compassion right away. We first of all need to start by allowing ourselves for the other to exist. One of the most important practices that are there in Buddhism is the practice that is called of Tonglen. It's called Tonglen, and that is exchanging, giving, receiving, that starts from another practice that is called Dakshin. That means making oneself equal with the others. And a little while ago I was reflecting. I had read a book, the beginning of a book of a contemporary philosopher. And something impressed me, because I saw that today the practice to get to compassion, it's not enough to equal and exchange oneself with the others. Most of us, we find ourselves in a previous step where we first need to allow the other to exist. And it's strange to say like that. But what happens is that we more and more have a hard time to relate to the other. Because we don't relate to the other, but we relate through the information that we receive of the other from a screen. You can just check how it's more and more difficult and almost like unfriendly to call someone. Because if I call you, then I'm putting you, I have to make you confront myself, and I need to confront you. If I send you some text message, then it's just easier. This terrible object that is our phone, it's an object through which we have access to the entire world. We can talk with whatever we want, we can write, we can read, we can communicate in any kind of way, we can buy, we can have fun, we can do all kind of things. We can get in touch with basically the whole world through our phone. But I get in touch with the world when I want, how I want, with what I want.
È un tipo di rapporto
And it's a type of relationship that, whether we are aware of it or not, generates an attitude that is more closed and more narcissistic. And more we have a difficulty in being with the other, in seeing that the other exists, to allow ourselves, because being with the other naturally brings a confrontation, also in a positive sense.
Quindi uno degli esercizi che dobbiamo
And
cominciare.
so one of the exercises that we should do is to really allow ourselves to get in touch with the other and allow the other to exist, and to say, you're there, I see you, and it's good for me to get in touch with you, because when I close myself away from the other, and then there is always a filter, like I talk with you when I want, how I want, and if I don't feel like it, then I click and I block you. But if you have the person in front of you, how can you block the person? But what happens is that if we look, then if we check, we become more and more fragile, less resilient, emotionally unstable, and anything could make us get agitated. But to actually be with the other also acts as a mirror for oneself, and that is extremely important. Also from the point of view of our spiritual path. It's not possible to evolve without the other. Sometimes I see the attitude like, no, I need a guru, if you're there, Lama, then it's fine, who cares about the rest? Actually, no. For example, how can I develop love if I don't have anyone to love? How can I get in touch with the most beautiful part of my being, that is love, compassion, without having someone to love and towards which I have compassion? How can I face my blocks, my anger, my hatred, and to practice patience if I don't have an object to practice with? How can I practice generosity if I don't have to whom I can give? And in the very ancient teachings, it's said that if we put on a scale the importance that for us have the sacred beings, Guru, who guides us along the path, and the importance of the sentient beings with which we are able to interact along our path, they have the same weight. You cannot do otherwise. You cannot do without. Once I had an experience that was quite funny, but I can't talk about what I lived. It's difficult to understand what the others lived. So I was in Albagnano and was showering. I just finished showering, and then at a certain point in the bathroom there was this drawer that was full of there was this bug that was going around, and I'm used to living with this kind of bugs, and I learned a while ago that they like also to eat tomatoes, but anyway, the only thing that they do to me is that if you smash them by mistake, they stink a lot, and also they poop on the curtains, and that remains there. But then, other than that, these bugs are not really dangerous at all, so somehow I learned how to live with them. Then one day, as I was in the shower, as I was in the bathroom, I saw one of these bugs that was drinking water in a corner of the bathtub. And then again, also the fact of empathy brought me, to think this bug is drinking water, I also drink water, and for an instant I really loved that bug a lot. I was looking at that bug and I had this feeling of love and really caring strongly about that bug. And what I had in that moment was a deep gratitude towards the bug, because that bug allowed me to get in touch with the most beautiful part of myself.
Noi abbiamo
We
bisogno
need
degli altri.
the others.
Più noi ci
The
chiudiamo agli
more we
altri,
close
più ci chiudiamo anche alle parti
up
più
from the
belle.
others, the more we also close away from the
Perciò un
good parts of
esercizio è quello di
ourselves. So
aprirci
one
agli
exercise is to
altri.
open ourselves up to the others.
Il secondo passo è io mi vedo
The
in
second
te,
step
genero empatia.
is I see
Dalla
you and I generate
empatia
empathy.
si genera
From
simpatia.
empathy, we generate sympathy.
Dalla
From
simpatia viene
sympathy
l'amore.
comes love.
Voglio che tu sia
I
felice.
want you to be happy.
Prima mi vedo in te,
First, I see
comincio a
myself in you.
sentire quello che
I start to
senti,
feel
comincio a
what you
generare
feel.
una
I
certa
start to generate a
vicinanza,
certain
poi c'è il
closeness.
piacere
Then
della tua
there is the
presenza, c'è una
pleasure of
certa
your
simpatia
presence.
che
There is a
si va a
certain
creare,
sympathy that is created.
non c'è più
There
lontananza,
is
da
no
questo
more
io voglio che tu
distance.
sia felice,
And
perché
because
io
of
mi
this, I
vedo in
want
te,
you to be
quindi
happy.
voglio che
Because I
tu
see
sia
myself in
felice,
you,
quindi
so I
voglio che
also
tu
want to
sia
be happy. I
felice.
also want you to be happy.
Da questo vedo
And
che tu
from this, I
soffri,
see that
non
you
voglio che
suffer.
tu
I don't want you
soffri,
to suffer.
dall'amore
And
nasce la
so from
compassione.
love comes compassion.
Finché da questa
And
compassione
then from
nasce
this
l'altruismo.
compassion comes altruism.
L'altruismo è quando io
Altruism
prendo
is
quella
when
stessa
I take
forza che ho
that
verso di
same
me e permetto a quello di
force that I have
espandere
towards me
e
and allow that
includere
to
l'altro.
expand and include the other.
Quindi, ciao che
And so,
va bene. Ci vediamo dopo. E quindi quello che succede che cos'è? Io
what happens is that
questo
I have
sentimento
this
nel
feeling
quale la mia
where
felicità è importante.
my happiness is
Ma
important,
oltre che
but
io voglio
other
essere
than
felice,
me
io
wanting
voglio
to
che
be
tu
happy,
sia
I also
felice.
want you to
Io
be
ti
happy. I
includo.
include you.
Non è un
It's
un
not
atto di
an act
escludere
of
se stessi
excluding
e andare
oneself
verso
and going
l'altro.
towards the
È un
other.
atto di
It's an act of
includere l'altro
inclusion
ed
of the other and
espandere quel
expansion
sentimento
of
nostro
that
dentro.
feeling that we have.
E quando sorge
And
l'altruismo,
when altruism
se va bene, se
arises,
uno genera l'altruismo
if one
bene,
generates altruism
c'è
well,
un momento
there is a
dopo
moment after
che è un
that,
momento di
there is a
frustrazione.
moment of frustration.
Perché se io voglio
Because
aiutare
if I
una
want to
persona,
help a person,
un essere,
a
quanto è
being,
faticoso?
how difficult is it?
Aiutare l'altro
To help
veramente ad
the
aiutare se
other,
stesso.
really, to help the other, to help
Facciamo
himself or
fatica già con
herself.
noi stessi,
We
figuriamoci
already have a
con
hard
gli
time
altri.
with ourselves, so imagine the others.
Immaginiamo che cosa vuol dire io
So
voglio che
let's
tutti
imagine
stiano bene.
what does it mean?
Quindi voglio
Like,
che
okay, I
ogni
want
essere che
everyone
incontro
to
sia
be well,
libero dalla
so I
sofferenza.
want every
Quindi
being that I meet
sorge
to
un
be free from
forte senso di
suffering. So
impotenza.
a strong sense of impotency arises.
Quindi uno si espande
So one
verso gli
expands
altri
towards
e in
the
qualche
others
modo
and somehow
ritorna verso di
comes
sé e
back
dice
towards
adesso
oneself
che
and
cosa
says,
faccio?
me now, what do I
Ed
do?
è qui che
And
nasce
that's
quella che abbiamo
where
chiamato la
comes
bodhicitta.
what is called bodhicitta.
La bodhicitta è quando io dico,
Bodhicitta is when I
a me
say
stesso, io
to
non ho
myself,
scelta
I don't have any other
se non
choice
sviluppare le
if
mie
not to
qualità nel
develop
loro
my
massimo
qualities to their
potenziale,
maximum
se non
potential,
crescere
if not to
spiritualmente
grow
me stesso
spiritually
per
myself,
poter a tutti gli
to
effetti aiutare gli
then
altri.
be able by all means
Io
to
non
help
posso
the others. I
portarti in un
cannot
luogo che non so
take you to
andare,
a place where I
non
cannot
posso farti
go, I
vedere
cannot
quello che
show
io
you
stesso
what
non
me
vedo.
myself I cannot see.
In altre parole,
In other
come faccio
words,
io ad
how
aiutarti ad
can
amare
I
se io non
help
sono
you to
capace di
love if I'm
amare?
not able to
Come
love?
faccio io ad
How can
aiutarti ad
I
essere
help
più
you
paziente
to
se io
be more
stesso non lo
patient
sono?
if me myself I'm not patient?
Quindi il
And
bodhisattva
so the
non è un
bodhisattva
essere che
is
ha
not
già
a being that
raggiunto
has
uno
already
stato di
reached
illuminazione. Il
a
bodhisattva
state of
è un essere che è
enlightenment.
riuscito ad aprire il
Bodhisattva
proprio
is a
cuore
being that managed to
verso gli
open his
altri
heart
e
towards
allo
the others
stesso tempo
and at the
di
same time to
sviluppare una profonda
develop
fiducia in
a
se stesso.
deep trust in oneself.
Quindi all'atto di dire
And so
io
it's the
voglio
act
sviluppare me
of
stesso
saying,
per
I want to
essere in
develop
sostegno e
myself
aiutare gli
to
altri.
sustain, to
Questo è
support the
un
others.
bodhisattva.
This is a bodhisattva.
La ghirlanda di gioielli del
The jewel
bodhisattva
garland of the bodhisattva
perché
is
quello che
because
Atisha ci
what
spiega
Atisha explains
sono
us
cosa dovrebbe fare, come
is
sarebbe l'ideale per
what
vivere
would
qualcuno che è un
the
bodhisattva,
ideal
qualcuno che
thing,
veramente vuole crescere
the ideal way
spiritualmente
of
e vuole
living
aiutare
would
gli
be
altri.
for a being that
Qual è
wants to
la
grow
condotta
spiritually and to
ideale?
help the
E
others.
i
What is the
gioielli
ideal
sono qualcosa
conduct?
che ci adornano,
And jewels are something
ci
that
fanno più belli.
make us more
E i
beautiful,
gioielli del
adorn
bodhisattva
us. And the
sono
jewels
gioielli
of the
interni, non sono
bodhisattvas
gioielli esterni.
are inner jewels, not outer jewels.
E quindi questo testo
And so, in this text,
Atisha ci dà dei
Atisha
consigli di
gives
cuore a
us
cuore, perché
advice from heart to
ricordiamoci
heart,
che
because
questo
let's
non è un
remember that
testo che
this
Atisha ha
is not
scritto
a
per
text that
farti
Atisha
fare un
wrote
libro,
in order to publish a book,
o perché c'è
or
un momento di
because there
fare un
was a
congresso
moment
e
where he
doveva
had to give a
scrivere qualcosa
congress and he had to
formale.
write something formally.
Questo libro,
This book,
questo testo è
this
proprio
text
la
is really the
trascrizione
transcription
dell'essenza
of
delle
the essence of the
conversazioni intime
conversations
fra lui e il suo principale
between him and his main disciple,
Il testo comincia
and the text starts.
Tukje chenpo la chatselo, lama nam la chatselo, tebe la chatselo. Comincia prima di tutto rendendo
Starts first of all by paying homage. And this is a common act in all the Buddhist texts that start by paying homage as an act of humility.
Difficilmente troverai un
Hardly you will find a text where one starts by saying, look how good I am.
addirittura
Even
i testi una volta
the texts they used to
in
be
India, poi successivamente in Tibet,
in India and
il
also
nome
in Tibet after that,
dell'autore non era
the
mai
name of the author was never on the cover.
il nome
The
dell'autore
name
da
of the
sempre
author
si trovava alla
was
fine
always
del
at the end
testo,
of the
un po'
text, a bit
nascosto,
hidden,
difficile da trovare.
hard to find.
Perché uno dovrebbe
Because one
giudicare il testo
should
dal suo
judge
contenuto e non
the
dal
text from its content and not by the author.
Atisha comincia rendendo omaggio.
So Atisha starts by paying homage.
Rende omaggio alla parte più
It
importante che è
pays
l'amore
homage to the most important thing, which is the love and compassion, to Cempo.
Ed è interessante
And
perché
it's interesting
quando si va a
because when
tradurre,
we translate,
si dice omaggio alla grande
we
compassione.
say homage to great compassion, but the word tukche in Tibetan, tuk
Vuol dire da
Tuk
solo
means
mente,
by itself
mente,
mind,
cuore,
mind,
che
heart,
non è la mente
which is not the
razionale,
rational
la
mind,
mente
it's
più
the
connessa al cuore. Se uno
mind
chiede
that is more
dov'è la
connected to
mente,
the
tuk,
heart. So if one asks where is the
non è
tuk
nella
mind, is in the chest, not in the
diverse
head.
parole per mente.
There are different words for mind
Tuk
in Tibetan.
vuol dire mente,
Tuk
cuore.
means heart, mind.
Je vuol dire
Je
il,
means
il capo
the
più importante.
the boss, the most important, the protector in some
Noi
context.
diciamo Je
We say
Rinpoche.
Je Rinpoche.
Je fa riferimento al
Je
Signore,
is
a qualcuno che è in
refers
una
to the
posizione di
Lord,
importanza,
to someone that
quindi
is
più
in a
importante
position
della
of
mente.
importance. So
Tukje, il
Tukche,
capo della
the,
mente, il più importante della mente. Chi è il
the
più
most
importante della mente?
important
L'amore e compassione.
thing of the mind. What is
Quando noi
that? That is
diciamo
love and
Tukche
compassion. So
Cempo,
when we say
la
Tukche
grande viene
Cempo
tradotto come grande
is translated as the
compassione.
great compassion.
Il termine in
The right
origine vuol dire
term originally
il
means
più importante
the
della mente,
principle
lo stato più importante della
of
mente
the
sta
mind,
che è la
the main
capacità
state
di
of
voler
mind
bene
itself,
agli
which
altri,
is the
di
ability to
aprire il
love the
proprio
others, to
cuore agli
open
altri. E
our
questo
heart
grande
to the
amore e
others.
compassione
And this
viene
great love and
descritta
compassion is
come
described as
l'acqua
water
che è importante
that is
all'inizio,
important at the
durante
beginning,
e alla
during,
fine.
and at the end.
Immaginiamo un seme.
So let's
È
imagine a
grazie
seed
all'acqua
that it's
che il seme
thanks
può
to water that
germogliare.
is able to sprout.
È grazie
It's
all'acqua che quel
thanks to
germoglio
water
può
that
crescere e
sprout
diventare un
can
albero.
grow and become a tree.
E è grazie
And it's
all'acqua
thanks
che
to water
quell'albero
that
può dare
that
dei
tree
frutti.
can give fruits. And
Similmente, è
similarly,
grazie all'amore.
it's thanks
Amore e
to love.
compassione
Love and compassion is the same thing.
sono due
Two
manifestazioni diverse dello
manifestations
stesso.
of the same.
È grazie all'amore
It's
che uno riesce
thanks to
a
love that one is
entrare
able
nel
to get in
sentiero
touch,
spirituale
to
effettivamente.
really
Questo
get
l'amore
into
verso
the
se
spiritual
stessi
path,
e l'amore verso
into
gli
the
altri.
love towards oneself and
È
towards the
sempre la
others.
stessa
And it's
forza
always the
dell'amore
same
che
force of
permette
love
al praticante
that
di
allows the
crescere
practitioner
nel
to
proprio
grow
percorso.
in his
E una volta
path. And
raggiungendo lo
once,
stato di Buddha è sempre l'amore che lo permette di
having
continuare a
reached the
raggiungere
state of
il proprio
Buddhahood, it's always the love that allows him to
Quindi,
continue to
alla
act
base
for
chi
the
rende
for the
omaggio a
benefit
Tisha?
of beings.
L'amore e la compassione.
So eventually, Atisha is paying
Secondo,
homage to
rende
love and
omaggio ai suoi
compassion.
maestri. Lama
So
Nam
the second is the homage to the
mi
masters.
prostro,
I
rendo
prostrate, I
omaggio
pay
ai
homage
miei guru,
to my
ai
gurus,
guru, ai maestri, alle guide
to
spirituali.
spiritual guides.
E qua c'è una parola
And
interessante
here
che
there
a
is
me
an
mi
interesting
piace
word that
molto,
I've always
che invece
that
di
I
usare
like a
la
lot,
parola
and instead of
guru,
using the word
spesso viene usata
guru,
la parola
often
Gewe Shenye,
is all use the
che
word
in sanscrito
kewe.
sarebbe Kalyana Mitra.
In Sanskrit will be Kalyana Mitra.
Kalyana
Kalyana
Gewe
Mitra,
Shenye vuol
kewe
dire
shenye,
amico virtuoso.
means virtuous friend.
Mitra
Mitra
viene di Maitri.
comes from Maitri.
Quindi
So
l'amico,
the Mitra is the
ecco, è
friend,
colui
is
che mi
whom
vuole bene, che
loves
mi
me,
ama.
who loves
Quella è
me,
la
who,
base della definizione di un amico.
that
Un
is the,
amico è
the
qualcuno che
definition of a friend. A friend is someone that
sei mio
loves
amico,
us.
vuol dire che
You're
mi
my
ami.
friend, it means that you love
Quindi la
me.
mia felicità
So
è
my
importante per
happiness
te.
is important for you.
Ci possono essere
But
amici che
there could
vengono
be
detti
friends that are
virtuosi, amici
described
non
as
virtuosi.
virtuous and some that are
Un
described as
amico
non-virtuous. A
virtuoso è un
virtuous
amico,
friend
qualcuno
is a
che mi
friend,
vuole
someone
bene e la
that loves me, and the
interazione con quella
interaction
persona
with
mi
that
permette
person
di
allows
crescere,
me to grow,
mi permette di
allows me
migliorare in
to
quanto
improve
persona.
as a person.
Mentre dall'altra parte
While
ci
on the other
possono
hand,
essere
there
persone
could
che
be
ci vogliono
people
bene,
that
ma
love us, but
l'interazione
the
portano
interaction with
più a
them,
sviluppare delle
they
cattive
bring us
abitudini che
to
altre.
develop
Ok.
more bad
Quindi il
habits
significato
than
di guru,
good.
guida
So the meaning of
spirituale, uno
guru,
dei
spiritual
nomi
guide, one of the
più
names
importanti quando viene
that are
descritto la
given
guida
when
spirituale
describing the
viene usato
spiritual
il
guide is
termine
used the term
Gewe Shenyen,
Gewe
amico
Shenyen,
virtuoso.
so virtuous
Lama
friend.
Ganchen
Lama
spesso
Ganchen often
l'ho sentito dire, io
I
prima di
heard him
tutto
saying,
sono
really,
un
first of
amico,
all, I am a
se
friend.
vuoi posso
If you
essere
want,
anche il tuo
I can
guru,
also be your guru.
ma prima di tutto
But
sono
first of
qua per
all,
essere
I
un
am
amico.
here to be a friend.
E questa è una cosa
And
molto
this is
importante,
a
perché
very
vuol dire
important
che
thing
alla
because it means
base
that
del
at the
nostro
basis
percorso ci
of
deve
our
essere
path there
fiducia
should
e
be
amore.
trust and love.
Questo è quello che c'è alla
This
base.
is what is there at the basis.
Quindi Atisha rende
So
omaggio ai suoi
Atisha pays
maestri,
homage to his masters, and
particolarmente
particularly
Atisha aveva un maestro
Atisha
principale
had a
che si
main
chiamava
master that
Guru
was called Guru
Suvarnadipa,
Suvarnadipa
che veniva
that
della isola di
came
Sumatra
from that was in
in
the island
Indonesia.
of Sumatra in Indonesia.
Ed è interessante
And
perché
it's
Atisha in un
interesting
certo
because
punto della
Atisha,
sua vita,
at a
se
certain
dovessimo
point of
usare
his
questo
life,
termine,
if we
era
had
al
to use this
massimo della
term, it was
carriera
like
monastica.
okay, at the peak of
Era
the
già un
monastic
maestro
career, so to speak. He
riconosciuto
was
con
a
tanti
very
discepoli,
recognized master with a
aveva
lot of
tutta la sua
disciples.
importanza,
He had a lot of
grande
importance, great
conoscenza,
knowledge.
però a un certo
But
punto
at a
lui
certain
riconosce
point,
che
he
dice:
recognizes that
io tutta la
me,
parte della
all
teoria
the parts of
sull'amore
the
e la
theory on
compassione
love
ce
and
l'ho,
compassion, I
ma
have
mi
it, but
manca una realizzazione
I
più profonda.
lack a deeper realization.
Quindi devo
And
cercare
so I need to
qualcuno
look for
che
someone
non sia bravo a
that
spiegare la
is
teoria,
not
ma
good
che
just
sia
to explain
amore e
the theory, but
compassione
that
veramente.
is really love and
E in
compassion.
qualche modo sente
And somehow
parlare di questo
he
maestro in
hears
Indonesia. E anche qua
about
chiedi
this
nel
master in
XI
Indonesia,
secolo,
and also
Atisha
here I ask myself, in the
possiamo
11th century, but
parlare di Guru
how
Suvarnadipa e
can you
parte per la Indonesia.
can
Sono
you
13
know of
mesi di
Guru
lungo e
Suvarnadipa
parte.
and then leave for 13
Io una volta ho
months on a
conosciuto
ship
un
to go
ragazzo
there?
che
Once I
era un
met
bravo veleggiatore e che conosceva
a
quelle
man that
acque di
was
quella
a
zona
good
e gli ho chiesto: ma può
sailor
essere che uno ci
and then
veda
knew the
13 mesi
currents
per
of
andare in
those,
barca? Lui ha detto:
those
guarda, in quella
that
zona
part.
lì
And
ci
I
sono
asked him,
delle
but is it
correnti molto
possible that it
difficili.
takes 13
È
months to
molto
get there?
probabile che
And he
uno
said,
anche
yes,
torni
there
indietro,
are
rimane
very
bloccato
strong
in tutta
currents and
quell'acqua,
difficult
molto
currents, so
difficile
it's
da
very
gestire
likely
in
the
quella zona.
one gets
E quindi
blocked and
si
goes
racconta che è
around and
stato un
around.
viaggio
So
difficilissimo, Atisha ci ha
it is
voluto
said that it was a
13
very
mesi.
difficult journey and
Poi arrivando lì
took
è rimasto
13
con Guru
months to
Suvarnadipa per
Atisha,
12 anni.
and then he remained there with Guru
E poi
Suvarnadipa
quando
for
il
12
paese,
years.
l'Indonesia, ci sono
Then
state delle guerre, stavano
uh,
iniziando delle guerre, si stava
some wars were
degenerando, lui è
starting in
tornato.
Indonesia, and then he
E
left to go
anche se
back.
avessero filosoficamente aveva una visione un po' diversa
And
Guru
even if
Suvarnadipa e Atisha,
philosophically they had a bit
però
of a
è
different
stato
vision,
chi gli
Atisha
ha
and Guru Suvarnadipa,
trasmesso
then he was
l'essenza, gli insegnamenti, il
who
metodo
transmitted to
per
him
sviluppare l'amore e compassione. Quindi
the meaning,
fra
the
tutti i
essence,
maestri quello che lui
and
sempre
the
aveva
method
al cuore
to
più di
develop love and
qualunque altro
compassion.
era Guru
So
Suvarnadipa.
who he
Quindi quando dice
had
Lavanam la
closest to his
Chazalo fa
heart was
riferimento
Guru
anche
Suvarnadipa. So when he
principalmente a Guru
said
Suvarnadipa. Tebel Hala Chazelo
this homage to the masters, then he refers
sono le
especially also to
divinità di
Guru
fede.
Suvarnadipa.
Le divinità di
Then
fede fa riferimento
there are the deities of faith.
ai vari
This
Buddha
refers
che
to the
allo
various
stesso
Buddhas that
tempo
at the same
sono
time
anche archetipi.
are also archetypes.
Sono i vari Buddha che
The
ispirano
various
la
Buddhas
pratica,
that inspire
che
the
fungono
practice
da
and that
ponte
act
per
as a
farci
bridge
connettere
to
con le
make us
nostre proprie
connect
qualità.
with our
Adesso non
qualities.
voglio
Now,
restare qua
I
a
don't want
divagare,
to get too long in
però
this,
nel caso di
but
Atisha,
in the
quando
case of
faceva
Atisha,
riferimento era
when
principalmente
was talking about this,
riferimento a Buddha
he
Shakyamuni,
was especially referred to
Tara
Buddha
verde
Shakyamuni, green Tara,
e una forma di
and
Akshobhya
a
chiamata
form of
Niyogya.
Akshobhya
Questi
called
erano i tre
Myobhya.
e
These
Avalokiteshvara.
were, and also
Queste sono le
Avalokiteshvara.
quattro
These were the
divinità
four
Kadampa che vengono
Kadampa
chiamate, le quattro
deities,
pratiche
the four
principali di
main
Atisha.
practices of Atisha.
E poi comincia
And then it
questa
starts
conversazione.
with
Poi
this
se
conversation.
noi andiamo a
Then
prendere il
if we
testo
take the text
nel libro dei Kadampa,
in the book of
dove
Kadampas,
c'è tutta la
where there is
trascrizione
the
della
whole
conversazione
transcription
completa,
of the complete
e dici wow, che
conversation. So I
bellezza,
say,
no? Qua
wow, how
stavano
beautiful
2 ore
that he spent
parlando
hours
Drom
talking,
Tompa e Atisha
Drom
e alla
Tompa and
fine della
Atisha, and at the end
conversazione
of the
Drom Tompa
conversation,
andava e
Drom
scriveva
Tompa
tutto.
went and write
E
everything,
lì per esempio fa
um,
riferimento quali sono i
would write
maestri, lui
everything
rende
down.
omaggio a tutti i
And
suoi
so
maestri, ricorda
he
ognuno
pays
per
homage to every master, remembers each one by name, pays homage to each one of them, and at the end, there's like a summary, homage to the masters. So the text, the original text, the complete text is very beautiful also. So then there is the part of the advice that starts, that it is what we will see these days. The first part we saw it yesterday. So put aside all doubt and hesitation and take delight in earnest practice. Abandon entirely lethargy, dullness and laziness, and exert yourself constantly with enthusiasm. I wanted to share with you a personal anecdote to make you understand a bit better what do we mean here.
Diversi anni fa stavo studiando nel
Some years ago I was studying in the monastery of Serame in India, and during the studies, the studies are basically divided in three parts. There are 3 exams a year. One is of debate, and it's very beautiful because in the exam of debate, in order to prepare yourself for it, there are 2 exams a year, and when you're close, when you're 1 month away from the debate, you're given the questions. It's 150 questions, but at exam you pick one, and then you have to debate for 1 hour on that in front of the others. And that's a beautiful system, because then you have to study all the subjects, because you don't know what question will be up to you, and it's not like you cannot also debate on that if you don't know the context, so you cannot also learn the answers by heart. And I really like debate. When there were sessions of debate every day from 6 to 9, and often I would stay until 11, midnight, continue debating. I really enjoyed it a lot. I really liked the lessons of debate, and then there was the part of reading and the written exam. And then there was the exam of memorization. Exam of memorization, one had to memorize word by word some text, and as a minimum it was 100 pages a year, which is more or less 100 A4 pages. This was the minimum that one had to do. And I didn't like to memorize, so when there was the exam of debate, then I would be among the first ones. We were about 70s in my class, and I was an exam of debate, always ending among the top 5, and in the memorization among the last 3. But the exam that will allow you to go to pass the year was the one of debate, and I didn't like to memorize. One day, one of my disciples came. There was a disciplinary master, and it was the one that was supposed to give the exam of memorization. And at the exam, okay, you bring the book that you memorized, and so he picks a row, and then you have to keep on reciting what comes after that. Then he flips some pages and then reads another row. You have to continue from that. And also a friend of mine once tried to cheat, because the people that gives the exams usually read like the upper rows, and he only memorized like the upper parts of the text. And that time the person that gave the exam just took another part of the page, and so it didn't go well for him. Also because the examiner was his own master, so that was even more shameful.
Per dire che anche in monastero queste cose.
So this is just to say that also in the monastery these kind of things happen. And in the debate exam, it's impossible to cheat. There is no way of doing it. So it happened that I was 1 month and a half away from the exam of memorization, and my master comes to him one day, Geshe Tupten Lempa, and he says, you know that there will be the exam of memorization soon, right? Yes, sure. And did you prepare yourself? Yeah, more or less. How many pages have you memorized? Yeah, like more or less 13. More less than more, so say 13. You know that that the minimum is 100 pages? Yes, but you know, like I'm a Westerner, we're not used to memorizing, it's all part of our culture, and it's difficult, and so on. And we knew each other very well. So he looked at me and told me this sentence. Remember one thing, if you don't put effort, energy, if you don't put effort in what is difficult for you, then where else will you put it? And that touched me deeply because I believed that I was putting a lot of effort in the studies. I was going to lessons where I shouldn't have been, like the lessons of the following years, because I liked to receive the teachings from my master. I would stay in the debate for a long time. I was reading and studying a lot, and I was doing well for what it was. But those things, I really liked them, and they came spontaneously to me. And so, if you don't put effort in what is difficult for you, then where else do you put it? The definition of effort eventually is to put energy in what is positive, virtuous, important, but not easy. At that time, I said myself, okay, I have to memorize, and I started memorizing like as I never did, and I got to exam that I had more or less 120 pages memorized. The only time in my personal story. And that showed me that if I put energy, then I can do it. But the effort is this. The effort is to put energy into what is positive, but that doesn't come easy, spontaneous. So when Atisha tells us abandon, put aside all doubt and hesitation, that is, have clarity on what you want. Cultivate that desire and take delight in earnest practice. It's very beautiful, this way of saying, like, take delight in earnest practice, because one of the definitions of effort given by Shantideva in the text of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, here the beauty of the Tibetan language, that with little you can say a lot. Tsun ka. What is enthusiastic effort? Tsun is enthusiastic effort. Kan, what is it? Answer, Gela Trovao. Ge means virtue, La, the two to the. Trova means happiness, the joy. Joy in what is virtuous. So what is virtue? What is enthusiastic effort? To have joy in putting energy in what is virtuous, even when that is not easy. So take delight in the sense, put energy into something that is positive, important for us, which shouldn't be lived as something like a burden, a sacrifice. Giving a personal example, very simple one, but to understand, I had to go on a sort of journey, inner journey, to change the way I eat, because some things that I really like to eat are not good for me. At the beginning, there is that feeling that it's almost like a sacrifice. I can't eat cheese that I really like. I also had the thing to cook the raclette, then mozzarella and all of that. Now when I go in Switzerland, it's like a torture somehow. You cannot eat cheese. But fortunately, I managed to go from a place where it was difficult to not eat cheese to a place where it's joyous to not eat cheese, because it's a manifestation of love towards myself. I'm sorry that you cannot eat cheese. No, actually, I'm happy that I don't eat cheese. It means that I love myself and I can respect my needs. And so, this take delight. It means that when we know that something is really good for us, is important, is healthy, even if that is difficult to put it in practice, then there is joy in doing it. Because to do what is good for us is an act of love towards ourselves. To avoid what is harmful for us is an act of love towards ourselves. And that's one of the things that we need the most. And then, is it difficult? Yes. And here comes another advice from a teacher, which is not in this text, but that is part of these conversations, but it's not in the summary, where a teacher tells Tromtompa, don't be afraid of suffering. And Tromtompa replies, how, master? But if I don't have fear of suffering, then I will end up suffering even more. Because just because I am afraid of suffering, I try to avoid what generates suffering. And Atisha replies, actually, we suffer much more for the fear of suffering than for suffering itself. So don't be afraid of suffering. What we should be afraid of is not of suffering, but of the causes of suffering. Fear of anger, of envy, of arrogance, of hatred, of ignorance. And so I should avoid them by all means. When we develop this strong fear of the causes of suffering, what happens is that in our path, one of the key points is to change habits. And in the change of habits, up to getting to a change of paradigm, which is a deeper habit, is difficult. To create a new habit demands effort. And if I am afraid of putting effort, then I will also have a hard time putting energy into something to make a positive change. It's a bit like pain. I don't like pain. But when it's useful, then it's welcome. Someone could say, but what do you mean, Lama, when it's needed? For example, I had some problems to my arm and other things, and I went to treat myself I got treated by a Chinese doctor, and every treatment I felt like very strong pain, okay, without giving details here with the cups and the little hammer with the pointy spikes and these kind of things. And she always said, Lama, you're very strong, you can and there I learned that thing. Yes, it's painful, yes, but then it's also, this is also good for me, so I relax. And there was a very important experience to allow myself to feel pain without generating tension. Because usually if there is pain, then we get rigid. And at the beginning I was like that, then I saw that if I was able to get relaxed, as I was feeling the pain, also the pain was less. But what happens is that pain, because I knew that it's good for me, because then after that I feel better and it helps me to feel better, then it's welcome. If I go to a physiotherapy session and I feel pain, it's not that the pain is the goal, but if that is part of the process to then feel better, then it's welcome. So the problem is not suffering itself, by itself. The problem are the unhealthy dynamics that generate suffering. Because the process of thinking in a different way, creating, talking in a different way, changing habits is difficult. It's like sitting to meditate. At the beginning, for us to sit and stay still is very difficult. Why? Because we don't have a habit to do that. Even more, it's difficult to keep the mind still because we don't have the habit. Even more difficult is to go beyond selfishness and to open the heart to the other because we don't have the habit for that. And so to change habit is difficult, but when we are doing what is really good for us, then we welcome that effort because it means that we are creating a new positive habit. I'm not sure if this is clear. If there is no effort, then it means that I am in my comfort zone. And if I am inside of my comfort zone, then that means that I continue maintaining the habit of what I am already. And I repeat once again, absolutely the path is not made out of pain and suffering. It's not that the more you suffer and the more you evolve in the path. If it was like that, then I would have many possible ideas to evolve in our path. It's not like that. So it's not that the meter to measure how much I'm evolving is how much I suffer. It's not that, but changing habits demands effort. To meditate is not simple, and it's a bit like the story of Milarepa, where at the end of the life of Milarepa, I didn't read it in the biography of Milarepa, which is also a very beautiful book. I heard it once from His Holiness Dalai Lama during some teachings. And he told the following, that Milarepa gets towards the end of his life. It is very important master meditators, one of the most important meditators of the history of Tibet and of Buddhism in general. And he was together with one of his main disciples called Rechumpa. And Rechumpa was leaving for a journey, and there was this tradition that if you leave for a journey and we are close to each other, I accompany you for a part of your journey. And the more important you are, the longer the part that I come also with you. Also, if you're coming towards me, then I walk part of the way to meet you. Like for example, so when Trijang Rinpoche will come here, Lama Ganchen will go at least towards Locarno to welcome him, to then accompany him. So there is this tradition of being part of the way. When someone is very important that is coming, you should do at least half of the way. So it's actually the same way, because you do half together and then half to come back. Or half to go and meet the other and half to come back together. And Kyabche Trijang Rinpoche also would do this without ever giving the bag to the master until you won't see him anymore. So Milarepa accompanies his disciple for a while, and then at a certain point Rechumpa says farewell, knowing that they will have never met each other again, because Milarepa was already quite old, and where he was supposed to go was months away walking, and months to go and months to come back, and they had that certainty that they will have never met each other. And so he leaves, first without giving the back, and then gets far away, and then he turns away for walking. And when I imagine that it's like 50, 100 meters away, then Milarepa calls him back. Then he says, "No, come back here, son. I forgot to give you the most important instructions." And I tell myself, okay, I wonder what Rechumpa would have thought. Luckily that, fortunately, you remember now. I mean, we were years together. Okay, so yeah, thank you a lot. Of course, he did not think about this, Rechumpa, but anyway, he gets there, and Rechumpa says, "Yes, master." And when he gets closer to Milarepa, Milarepa gives him the back, pulls up the skirt, and shows him the butt. They didn't have like underpants at the time, so he really shows his naked butt, and it was a butt that was described as a sort of monkey butt, like very raw, and it became like that after many years sitting on naked rocks meditating, because Milarepa was so poor that he didn't have even the possibility of having a cushion, so he just meditated for many years in winters and so on, in the cold of the Tibetan mountains of 5,000, 6,000 meters of altitude. I went once to the caves of Milarepa, and it was like tremendous effort to get there at almost 6,000 meters, and so his body was marked by what he had lived. So he turns back again, looks his disciple in the eyes, and he tells him, "Remember that without effort there is no result." Which doesn't mean that one has to suffer, but it means that one should put energy. And the beautiful thing is to put energy with joy. And joy comes not from the experience of the process, but from the awareness of the direction towards which I'm going. Then along the path there are also many joyous and beautiful things, but if I am sick and I am aware of being on a process of healing, even if that treatment is difficult, that still gives me joy. My personal experience is that when I do a treatment and I have the feeling that what I'm doing is good for me, even if that is difficult, then I like it. And so when Atisha here tells us, take delight in earnest practice, means that first of all do it with joy, but don't fool yourself. It's not like sometimes a little bit, and no, yes, I am a Buddhist, but I don't really follow what Buddha said. Yes, I do a bit like this, but yes, when it's convenient for me, I do it, otherwise not. Do it really. Take yourself seriously and the path that you chose. And if Atisha said this to Drom Tompa, that was because also in the 11th century in Tibet it was not obvious to do it. And so when we have a hard time in having clarity in our direction and to really follow with seriousness and joy, it's not because we are here in Italy in 2026. No, it has always been difficult. And then we have some further obstacles. Today, more distractions. But that's something that has always been difficult, but many were able to do it, and we are also doing it. And so, for this, the importance of trying to not be afraid of suffering. And here I take this opportunity to give one personal theory which is not developed to perfection, and so I give some warning at the beginning. It could be right or wrong. So I share it with you, and I leave the reflection to you. For me, the more I reflect on it, the more right it seems. So, but I leave the reflection also to you. I try to be concise. I have the feeling, as I observe, that when we have a certain type of suffering, we are in a moment of life that we have a certain amount of suffering, usually we attribute our suffering to a situation that we are living. What I've seen is that when that problem, at a certain point, then there is like a greater problem than that. Very often, it's not that the quantity of suffering sums. The object gets substituted, gets replaced. To say, okay, is to say, if I suffer a lot every day because I have wrinkles and I'm losing my hair and because of this and that, and then at a certain point there is a more solid object of suffering. It's not that I suffer because of the wrinkles and then also because of the sickness that I got. No, I care little about the wrinkles at that point, right? And then when you look at wrinkles, yeah, you will say, yes, it would be better if... But what happens is that it's as if, according to the moment of our life, we have a sort of quantity of suffering that we have to experience. And the situation changes, the object changes, but it's more or less, that's more or less the quantity of suffering. So you add or remove situations, then the quantity of suffering is more or less that. I've seen people with extreme suffering, with difficult situations, then you change the situation, the suffering remains the same. I've seen people that are doing quite well with little suffering, you had very difficult situations, then it remains quite the same. Yes, you're sorry for that situation, but it's not that the inner experience changes so much. I don't know if this is clear as a concept. Then I repeat, this is my own idea, on which still needs to be developed and to make sure that it's like that, but I have this perception. And so we should manage to close some cycles and to see which others we can open. And with this, I also saw how suffering is also often part of life. I don't know, have you experienced of a moment of your life that lasted for more than a few minutes with no type of effort or suffering? I didn't.
Sono momenti bellissimi,
Then there are very beautiful moments, very beautiful times, but that doesn't mean that there weren't difficulties or. So what happens is that since the moment this theory says that in the present moment I have a certain quantity of suffering or effort, so it's better to put effort into something that is good for me rather than to do it for something that is not good for me. And so when I take a path of change of habit, then it's difficult, yes.
però poi dopo
But then it's good for me.
Ed è qua che io dico non aver paura della sofferenza, perché tanto soffri.
And so that's why I say don't be afraid of suffering, because we suffer anyway. So very often until we have reached a state of balance that is very mature and that is possible to reach, suffering is still part of our lives, isn't it? But if I start from that idea that I should not suffer, first of all, we have much more fear of suffering, and so I'm pre-suffering, and then I check, why did it suffer? I shouldn't have suffered for that thing, it shouldn't have gone like that. When I welcome that I still have my mental defilements, my karmic force, and all of that, suffering manifests itself, so the point is not whether I suffer or not. The main point is in what direction I am walking. So if I'm walking towards a solution, or whether or if I'm reinforcing the problem towards myself and towards the world in which I live.
È chiaro questo? Okay? Perciò cerchiamo in qualche modo, ripeto una volta ancora.
Therefore, I repeat once again, it's not that suffering is necessary, absolutely not. Okay, if we don't have suffering, better. But suffering is also something that if I hide the suffering and I don't face the root, that's even worse. And so we shouldn't run away from suffering, we should heal the unhealthy dynamics. And in this process of healing, there is some effort involved, but often the solution seems more difficult than the problem itself, because the problem is now part of our comfort zone. We are inside of our comfort zone. Yeah, I got quite used to things, quite used to my jealousy, to my dissatisfaction, to my minds going around. Even if it's tremendously painful, I'm used to it. And so to do something that goes against the habits sometimes seems more difficult rather than remaining in the problem itself. So when Atisha tells us, take delight in earnest practice. Practice means training, means to do something that doesn't come spontaneously, but that is good for us. Earnest means to take it with the heart and to do it with constancy. To take delight, okay, means do it with joy, even if that is difficult. And here there is a lot. For me, the difficulty of explaining this text is that every verse we can spend hours and days, but the fundamental point here for me is that we have clarity on what we want and we direct ourselves towards that goal. We welcome who we are, and this is a fundamental point, to be able to do, as Atisha says, to take delight in earnest practice. There is a point before that we can't expect from ourselves to have already arrived. I don't know why, I don't know from where it comes, but sometimes I have the feeling that we start with this feeling that we should already be perfect. And if I'm not perfect, it's because there is some mistake, there is something wrong. And here, if we want, we can open a very long subject that I want to open now, but that I can touch slightly. That is what is called our pure nature. There are those that say we all have Buddha nature, we all have pure nature. There are even those that say we are some Buddhas, I don't know it. I would say, if I'm a Buddha and I don't know it, then I am a very ignorant Buddha. And when I started analyzing this thing of the pure nature, then I realized, okay, here there is something wrong. Then fortunately, going deeper in it, I found explanations that were coherent with me. That is the fact that when I say that I have pure nature, that doesn't mean that I am pure, but somehow I became impure. By pure, we don't mean perfect. We don't mean free from mental defilements. Pure means clean. Clean means free from dirt. Everything depends on what we mean by dirt. So in this case, our pure nature is that we, in every aspect, even the deepest aspects, are free from the dirt of an autonomous, intrinsic, objective existence. We are interdependent, we are relational, we are subjective. That is our pure nature. And so, if I look backwards, am I able to see whether there was one day where I was free from ignorance, selfishness and so on? No. And also would say, lucky, because if I was perfect and then I became like this, then I ask myself, okay, either I was wrong and then I was not perfect, or it was someone else's fault. But if it was someone else's fault that put me in this situation, that's even worse, which means that I depend on the other to get out of it. Then I have a tremendous effort to get out of the samsara, and then someone else says, no, come back here, come back to the samsara. No, that's even worse. So if I was pure and then at a certain point I fell once again, then it means that I do everything to get out of the cycle of suffering of samsara, and then one day I can fall again into it. That's a tremendous shit. So, when I cannot find one moment in my whole history where I was perfect, I was free from ignorance, from selfishness, and I cannot find that moment. Good. But I am an ignorant, selfish being, but free from an autonomous, objective existence. I am an ignorant being in a relational way. And every interaction transforms me. And so, if I act in a certain way, then I can decrease my ignorance until I can eliminate it. I can decrease my selfishness until I can eliminate it. In the same way for anger, rancor, hatred, and so on. And so, we don't start from a place where we should already be perfect. And it's very heavy on us to have this expectation, to put on ourselves this burden of already having to be perfect. And I actually don't know where this comes from, but we often have this. And so there is a very important place where I should welcome what I am, and I direct myself towards what I want to become. If I don't go through this step of welcoming what I am, so of not imposing on myself what I should already be, I cannot take delight in practice, because there is the burden of not being enough, of not doing the right thing, and so on. There is the judgment and the guilt that come with it. But on the other hand, when I start from a place of love and compassion towards myself, where I welcome myself, I'm like this, because I'm like this, because of causes, conditions, between one thing and the other that brought me to be what I am, and it's all fine in that sense, but I want to be different. And so I direct myself towards what I want to become, welcoming what I am without imposing what I should already be. And this is a bit the summary that I sometimes gave of having a high goal, low expectation and constant effort. The low expectation is about the fact of not imposing on ourselves the fact of already having arrived, both on ourselves and the others. I love you, and so I want you to be different, but I don't impose on you what you should already be. I see the world in which I am. I allow myself to dream in which world I would want to live, but I don't impose on this world to already be what I would want it to be. But actually, I have the third part, that is the constant effort. I put energy into being part of the solution, into pushing bit by bit to get to what I want to become. This is about myself, this is about the people around me, this is about society in general.
E queste tre cose
And
messe
these
insieme
three things put together have a tremendous power. So, high goal, I allow myself to dream what right now seems impossible. And as Lama Michel Rinpoche sometimes told us, it's just by believing in the impossible that the impossible becomes possible. So I allow myself to dream what is impossible, what seems impossible. So I don't impose on myself of having already arrived, so I have a low expectation and I have a constant effort. I'm walking in that direction, which is the same thing as when Atisha says, put aside all doubt and hesitation and take delight in earnest practice. And then it ends this part, what we touched yesterday a little bit, abandon entirely lethargy, dogmas and laziness, and exert yourself constantly with enthusiasm. Let's remember that to abandon laziness, we need, there are 4 antidotes to laziness. The first is faith, which is believing. Faith allows us to have aspiration, which is desire. Aspiration, the desire, brings us to have effort, and the real antidote to laziness is the result of effort, which is called flexibility or ductility, which means creating a habit. Once that has become a habit, then there is no more laziness. So first, I believe in the importance of that, I desire it, I put energy, I create a habit. This is the effective antidote to laziness. Until it's not a habit yet, then there will still be some laziness, because we don't want to put effort as a basis. So I want to meditate, but I can't because I'm lazy. So the problem is not putting effort into meditation, but not having understood how important it is, not really wanting it. The more I desire it, the more naturally I would put effort. It's like in a garden where one complains that there are no flowers, so the energy shouldn't be put in the flower. The energy should be put in the seeds. Okay, there are the seeds, but then we also need to put water, we need to put the nourishment for them. Then the flowers came. The effort comes naturally, and also the habit, if at the basis there is desire, and at the basis also of that one knows the qualities of that thing that one desires. So now let's make our dedications. And these verses, I invite you to read them, to memorize them, to keep them by hand, because sometimes maybe one wants to read, okay, abandon any doubt and hesitation and take delight in his practice, okay. We need to come back to it, because naturally we lose it, we forget.
Lame kutse rapten chi nam karatin le chokchur gepada losan tempe drume sasum ki drove munsel tatu ne gyur chi nimo dele tsindele nime kuyan delek shin ninsen taktu delek pe kuncho sumki chingelo kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol Kuncho sumki trashisho. All'alba,
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and to sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Oma hun tembala me sangye rinpoche, kyobala me tamcho rinpoche, drembala me gendo rinpoche, kyamne kuncho sumla chopa. Buon appetito.
Enjoy your lunch, everyone.
Una cosa pratica.
One practical thing.
Io vorrei magari in questi giorni,
Maybe
per
during
riuscire
these
ad
days, in order to
organizzarci
be able to
bene,
organize ourselves well,
coloro che
I
partono
would like
oggi,
that those that
che
leave
non ci sono
today and
domani,
that are
vogliono
not
venire a
there
salutare, o tutti
tomorrow and
coloro
want
che
to
ci stanno
say,
domani,
want
da
to come to
domani
say
ci
hi,
vediamo.
then they can
Ok?
come today, and those that will leave tomorrow, they will come tomorrow, and so on. Thank you.